Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, we are here with Carleton University's Professor Stephanie Carvin, and she spent the weekend monitoring the return of the convoy slash wannabe occupation
The
and
great freedoming.
the Great Freedoming. And I figured I'd just kind of get her take on what we saw, what we didn't see, and kind of what this is starting to mean for the future of this particular movement, if we're going to call it that. Stephanie, what were your observations?
So, most of us assumed that this would not be a repeat of what happened in February. That, I don't know how many of your viewers were aware that there was also a second convoy in April, but
The
this
quote
is
unquote rolling
the
thunder.
rolling thunder. Yes.
Yes.
Definitely rolling, definitely thunder. It was amazing. But yeah, so this is the third. It was probably closer to what happened in April, despite I think there being concerns about July 1st being kind of a real magnet for these kinds of things. So most of us kind of expected something like this, I believe. But part of it also, when you talk about what we saw and what we didn't see, what we definitely saw was a robust law enforcement presence, which is
Yes.
not something we saw back in February. So there
No.
may have been a deterrent effect, as it were. And, the law enforcement was quite keen, I think, to make it known that they were there and that they were not tolerating the shenanigans. Trying to set up tables. And one of the things that actually kind of makes me wonder, because of the fact that it's I was like, apparently some of the organizers are having trouble with permits. So I was like, is this like a permit thing? Is this like some kind of like a way for the authorities to kind of mess with the convoy, or is this just actually normal Ottawa? Then no one can actually handle permits. I was like, this
Yes.
could have gone either way. It could have been both,
Six of one,
honestly.
half a dozen of the other.
Weaponizing the bureaucracy as a way of doing this. So I think the good news is that, like, look, there was like a couple hundred people there. These are very well motivated people. One of the things we keep seeing is that this movement will consistently describe itself as a family, and part of the reason for that, and we can talk about this a bit more, is that these are people who've probably lost family and friends because of some of the views that they hold, and as a result of that, they really do just have each other. So this isn't just in some ways, it's just a bit of a bizarre jamboree for these guys. It's about mandates and things like this, and definitely anti-Trudeau, but also these guys just like each other and they like hanging out with each other. And so they had a big camp following the James Top March to the War Memorial, and then the Canada Day activities yesterday. July 2nd was mostly just a big camp fest for them. So
Okay.
that's kind of what this was.
Yeah, I do remember there was some chatter about them talking about trying to camp on Wellington or whatnot, but that didn't happen.
Did not. No, that
Did
was not
not.
going to happen. Yeah. There was a number of vehicles towed.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what I actually one of the things I think is kind of interesting is the way a bunch of them still think that law enforcement is on their side and feel betrayed when they're not. And I thought that's an interesting dynamic in terms of kind of their particular worldview.
Right. I think this is one of the things I noticed most about this event, right? Was that there does seem to be, I don't want to say it's divisions because it's early days and cracks, and like there's, maybe there's a lot to be said for, having to call your camp unity, because maybe you need to paper over some of those cracks. But there definitely does seem to be different elements of this movement emerging. So on the one hand, you have James Top. Now, James Top is a veteran. He is also, I believe, a reservist, and he was disciplined. I think not so much for taking the vaccine, but making an anti-vaccine speech while in uniform,
Yeah.
right? Which is something that we don't actually want our veterans doing, right? We don't want, we need our military to be apolitical. No, that's like a whole other kettle of fish, but we'll just leave it there. So he was someone who marched to the War Memorial, 4,000 kilometers, had a couple hundred people come out to support him on the last kilometers into the city. But what's interesting was the amount of discipline he had around his movement, right? So we saw pictures and video. There was someone who was wearing Canada flag pants. He found those offensive. and asked the person to remove that. He said that he didn't want any of the F Trudeau flags that we've seen. He also said that he didn't want any upside down flags. As a part of this movement. So he actually was disciplining, for a movement that's very much about freedom. This was not a free march. People were not free to do and say and be who they wanted to be. And we have seen people come out and criticize him for that and the Veterans for Freedom movement. And, I very much disagree with the Veterans for Freedom movement, but they are, I think, trying to put some kind of order, transform this into some kind of movement, discipline it, and lead it, right? That's what I ultimately think their goal is. On the other hand, you have what I will call team chaos, right? These are the people who are very much more conspiracy driven. They are there for the honking, right? They're there for the fun. They're there for the lulls. They want to wear the Canada flag pants. They want to wave the F Trudeau flags. And then some of them also, this is something we did see, was that there were people there who were trying to arrest Trudeau. They wanted to actually have a big rally on the Hill and go up to the Ottawa police and get them to arrest Trudeau at 12 p.m. on July 1st. That, of course, did not happen, thankfully, but they were handing out pamphlets trying to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is what we're seeing, is in some ways we're seeing, there's this great theory that, with the Muppets, right? You have the order Muppets, the Muppets who are trying to create some kind of semblance of a plan, and then the chaos Muppets, right? So, and that's what this movement is. And so where this movement goes is going to be really interesting, right? Because we're going to see these people go ahead and try and turn this into some kind of political momentum. On the other hand, though, if you are trying to tell a lot of these people who are there for the chaos that, they can't wear Canada flag pants, or they have to be disciplined, or they have to do these things, that's not going to work. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen. So it's very early, and I don't want to make any grand sweeping generalizations. So was there tension in this movement during this weekend? Absolutely. And we saw that. I don't think any moment crystallized that more than when Tom Mazzaro, right? He was actually up with the MPs, I think, just over a week ago, with James Topp, right? And he's tried to be a spokesperson for this movement, tried to be a leader for this movement. He comes out and basically says, don't, because people are getting mad at the police officers, as you said, because they were trying to control the crowds and not letting them do the things that they wanted to do. And he says, well, we have to, you can look at the speech online, but he's basically saying, look, people are mad at the police officers, but we have to thank them, because when the men, and he did use the term men, go off and fight, because I guess there's no female veterans or whatever, or soldiers, right? Why would there be? So when they go overseas and fight, it's the police officers that look after our families, which we're just going to leave that there. Again, we're just going to park that right there. But what I think we're seeing now is people were booing him. People were saying, no, this is, we're so mad at these police officers. And, I heard a lot on the live stream, this idea that, you can only say you're following orders for so long, right? So people are getting mad at the police officers. I think the way that some people are trying to circle the square here is that we saw Rebel Media, Keenan Becks, and stuff like this. They're no longer calling them police officers. They're calling them Trudeau's police officers, which is not true.
Which is not true
at all. It's the federal police force. It's the
Ottawa City Police.
It's the Ottawa City Police. Yeah. So that was a long answer to your question, but these are the tensions we are seeing in the movement, and it's going to be interesting to see if there is more activity, as has been promised. Where does this go? Yeah.
And just, I guess, my own experience of watching some of the disunity. I was walking back from Parliament Hill, must have been about 2 weeks ago, and I saw a bunch of them out front on Wellington, like yelling at one another about, I've sacrificed more to be here than you guys. And like, there was this scrap that was starting to happen. Just like,
Thomas.
But yeah,
I've given up everything. He basically gave the "I live in a van down by the river" speech. Like literally, he was saying he lives in a car and that he's given up everything. And if that's the case, you almost have that ounce of pity for him, and you're kind of like, wow, okay. And then to see him heckled by that crowd who does not at all respect his leadership or the sacrifice that he sees himself as having made is really interesting.
Yeah. I think it was also interesting to see the kind of free Tamara, free Pat King stuff going on as well. the movement, I guess, hasn't dissociated themselves from them as much as I think they might have.
Yeah, actually, if anything, I would say that one of the unifying figures in this movement is definitely Tamara Lick, right? Pat King less so, I think, because he was, again, more on the Chaos Muppet side. But the Tamara Lick, I mean, she's really it's not even like free Tamara Lick. They're saying free Tamara. She's kind of the Madonna now of the movement, right? Like just one name.
A little bit, yeah.
So I think that's part of it is that, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we could see, and I don't know when this is going up, but on Monday, we could see some action around the court where she is going to be, basically there's the bail hearing because she's, the Ottawa authorities have accused her of violating her bail conditions. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Just, I guess, in terms of your read, the grievance tourists, as I like to call them, a lot of whom are just farmers from out in the Ottawa Valley who thought this was a riot and came down. Do you think those are more on the Chaos Muppet side and are just, they think it's just a great time, or are they looking for someone to kind of organize themselves around? Do you get a sense of that?
So it's hard to say. I think if we look back in February, like I'm going to be a little bit sympathetic to this movement, right? You do have small businesses that have been suffering. You have people who have lost their jobs, don't know when we're getting back to normalcy. We don't have any level of government that's articulating a plan, right? It's kind of like we're in lockdown again, and we're not going to like make any promises, and we're not going to articulate how we're going to get back to normal. And I think the most extreme voices then came up with a plan, which is that fine, our plan is to just cancel everything, right? And then, but they were the only people who were really articulating some kind of vision. So I think that there was a failure of politics here, right? Like, so I actually understand the grievances that motivated people in January, February, which, doesn't mean I sympathize with them, but I understand them. You have to have some kind of empathy. This was not an unintelligible argument, but and this is why I think we didn't see the huge, massive showing of support this time around, right? I think possibly people didn't want to go because of the, the police presence, and Ottawa's a disaster of Canada Day anyways. But I think also on top of that, I think that, most of the mandates have been lifted. It's not really clear what this movement is about. It's still very much using the mandate rhetoric, right? They had a performer yesterday I watched whose hit song was Shove Your Vaccine Passport Up Your Ass, was the name of the song. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but here we are. Yeah. It's not safe for work interview. But that was the name of the song that they were. And so it's still very much about the themes that were there in February. But I think where we're going to see this movement evolve, one of the things we really did see, and I can tell from the comments in my Twitter, is it's moving towards a lot of the anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric that we're seeing in the United States, right? Yeah. Those same themes are being brought forward now, and we did see at least one of the speakers who I would, you could probably easily identify as a Christian nationalist at this point, is someone who, made those links, who, the people who are funding vaccines are the same people who are funding, the pro-trans movement. And so trying to create those linkages, if that's where this movement goes, and it was always going to have to reframe itself, I don't think it'll have that same broad appeal, but at the same time, it's going to have a chaotic impact on things like libraries, because we are seeing libraries come under attack. We are seeing in the cases where there are courts and there are people who have been facing charges associated with this movement, judges are now being harassed. So, just because this might become a small, more fringe, even if there is disunity in it, it will cause problems, I think, for the marginalized, who will inevitably become their targets. And then secondly, the institutions which deal with them.
Okay.
Sorry, these are long ansors.
Yeah, no, and that's quite all right. I mean, that's
it's a complex thing, right?
Here.
I just don't know, to the extent that farmers who were maybe on the outskirts of Ottawa are going to be motivated by those same things, right? They don't have any love for Trudeau whatsoever, but like I think they're maybe looking at this movement going, you know, we made our point. I just want to get on with the summer and get with it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think it might also be just the cycle of their own activity as well. I mean, someone I know who is a farmer in that area was like, yeah, in January, it's like, yeah, give them 2 more weeks. They're going to be busy with having to get ready for planting. So, you know, it would have diminished their attendance as well. So there is that to consider. One of the other things I want to get your read on is just the fact that Pierre Poilievre did show up for the James Top March, was very conspicuous in showing himself and filming himself marching with them, and creating a particular narrative around James Top's march and his activities. And I just wonder if you can kind of read what your read of the signal he's trying to send is around that.
So it's interesting. When we saw him, I mean, I was wondering if he would show up to the march. It was interesting. He showed up along, you know, I think there was a plaza that he showed up in and marched for a few minutes and then left, which, you know, to be fair, is the bare minimum support I think he could probably offer in person. But he felt it was necessary, right? I have no doubt that he was hearing from his supporters that he had to go to this and show something. Now, there's a cost to that, which is that now that there's all of this footage has been filmed and it's been recorded. And when, you know, if he inevitably, shouldn't say inevitably, but if he wins the conservative leadership, this will be used against him. And if this movement does become something else, then that will be, you know, there'll be questions about his judgment. And I mean, we've already seen this with regards to his comments with the central bank, with regards to cryptocurrencies and things like this. So, I mean, This is just going to be one more thing that can be used against him. Now, if we're talking about a general election, this is 3 years from now. So it's hard to figure out how something like this will play out. But I think that it's going to be something that his critics definitely remember, will be eager to remind people of. And James Top himself, I mean, has come under a lot of criticism that, you know, his supporters portray him as the most honorable man possible, a real leader, or someone who sacrificed and walked across the country. But at the same time, he's been on far-right podcasts. He's been on, you know, apparently there are, you know, there's photos suggesting, I don't know for sure, but definitely suggesting that he met with Rick Hillier yesterday. That's where he was, instead of at the picnics or at any of the Canada Day celebrations. So he's meeting with people who have extremist ties and themselves are under arrest. So whether, you know, for someone who's trying to show themselves as a leader, he's definitely cultivating ties within what we would probably call the alt-right, I guess, system, alt-right movement within Canada. But in some cases, you know, the Plaid Army Diagolon guys, I mean, they've been accused of you know, not the leaders themselves. I think the leaders themselves just kind of like attention, but you know, the people who follow them and are really motivated by this idea of creating a white ethno state, from which, you know, their kind of ideas can thrive. They were with wanting to kill 12 RCMP officers in Alberta, at Coutts, Alberta, during the convoy, right? So, you know, why you are affiliating with these people, I don't know. And certainly there were a few flags that were seen throughout the kind of quote unquote festivities, I guess, that were out there. So this is not a pretty picture. And, you know, like if you needed Oppo, I don't really know what else you could do to give someone Oppo. And you know, to be fair, like Diagolon's not a listed terrorist entity. It's out there. It's, you know, they'll come back and say it's a joke, it's funny, and really it's a joke until it's not a joke. Is kind of my view on this. But yeah, I mean, this is absolutely, like, I have to think that, you know, people on Poilievre's campaign were probably trying to figure out what to do, because so many of his supporters were probably saying, yeah, go see this James Top guy. But also knowing that, yeah, he's someone who very much has at the very least tolerated people with these kind of views, but also and have called for the overthrowing of the Canadian state. But also, this could get worse.
Yeah.
And it was a risk, and I'm not sure it's one that's going to pay off.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sacrificing your weekend to monitor these guys and for coming here to talk about it. It's really, I like having this perspective that we can try and analyze some of it with. So
I appreciate. Yeah, I guess the only thing I just want to say finally is, and this is just an important point, because
yeah,
these guys have a right to protest, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be clear, because everyone's like, you're calling everyone Nazis or whatever. I'm like, no, that's clearly not the case. And these guys have a right to protest, and protest, importantly, can be disruptive, right? You have the right to kind of be noisy and cheer and stuff like that. The issue is, this isn't a movement that's interested in trying to convince people. It's a movement that's trying to compel. And that's, so when you see someone like Poilievre hanging out with this movement, that's a real problem. Is the Conservative Party a law and order party or not? And that's the question they need to ask themselves. So I'll leave it there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll do this again.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.